The security guards gripped her arms like she was a criminal. Denise Holloway, dressed in a tailored gray suit, stood in the middle of Atlanta's first-class lounge while passengers watched and recorded. Her voice cut through the chaos with chilling calm. "You have no idea what you are doing." The overhead speaker announced Flight VX-247 to New York. Then the cockpit door swung open. The captain stepped out. Everyone froze. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe that respect should not depend on skin color, go ahead and hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Now, let us find out what happened when a pilot made a decision that would change everything. Denise Holloway was not the kind of woman who asked for permission to exist in spaces that others believed she did not belong. At 47 years old, she had spent her entire life proving people wrong, shattering expectations, and building something extraordinary from absolutely nothing. Born in Birmingham, Alabama, in a neighborhood where opportunity was a word people heard about but rarely touched, Denise grew up watching her father work harder than anyone she had ever known. William Holloway was a mechanic at a nearby Air Force base, a man whose hands could fix any engine but whose skin color meant he would never be promoted beyond a certain point. Her mother, Ruth, worked double shifts as a nurse at the county hospital, coming home exhausted but always finding the energy to help Denise with her homework. From the time she was a little girl, Denise understood one fundamental truth about America. If you were black, you had to be twice as good to get half as far. So she decided early on that she would be 10 times better than everyone else. Her brilliance earned her a full scholarship to MIT, where she studied aerospace engineering and graduated at the top of her class. The professors who initially doubted whether she belonged there eventually wrote her glowing recommendation letters. The classmates who underestimated her eventually came to her for help with their projects. Denise did not waste time proving herself through words. She let her work speak. After graduation, she could have taken comfortable positions at major corporations, but she had a different vision. With $30,000 scraped together from savings, a small loan from her mother, and an unshakable belief in herself, Denise started Holloway Aerospace Technologies in a rented garage in Houston, Texas. The first few years were brutal. Clients did not take her seriously. Investors laughed her out of meetings. One banker told her to her face that aerospace was not an industry for people like her. She kept that rejection letter framed in her office as motivation. 20 years later, Holloway Aerospace Technologies was worth $2 billion. The company supplied critical components to Boeing, Airbus, and multiple branches of the United States military. Denise had been featured on the cover of Forbes, profiled in the Wall Street Journal, and invited to speak at conferences around the world. But none of that changed the fundamental reality of being a black woman in America. No matter how many zeros were in her bank account, there would always be people who looked at her and saw only her skin color. Denise knew this. She accepted it. But she never let it stop her. This particular morning in November, Denise sat in the first-class lounge at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the busiest airport in the world. She had arrived early, as was her habit, giving herself an extra hour before her flight to New York. The lounge was quiet and elegant, with soft jazz playing through hidden speakers and the rich aroma of premium coffee filling the air. Leather chairs were arranged in private clusters, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of planes taxiing on the runway. Denise chose a corner seat near an electrical outlet, opened her laptop, and began reviewing the presentation she would deliver later that day. The presentation was important. In fact, it was historic. Holloway Aerospace had just signed a $500 million partnership deal with Velocity Airlines, one of the largest carriers in the country. This was the first time a major airline had partnered with a black-owned aerospace company on such a massive scale. Theodore Ashford, the chairman of Velocity Airlines, had called her at 5 that morning, unable to contain his excitement. "Denise, today is historic," he had said. "The first black-owned aerospace company to partner with a major airline. I will personally welcome you in New York. Denise had smiled, allowing herself a rare moment of pure pride. But even as she celebrated, a small voice in the back of her mind reminded her that success for people like her always came with asterisks, with people waiting for her to fail, with others who would never accept that she deserved her place at the table. She glanced down at her first-class boarding pass, seat 2A on flight VX247. She thought about her father, who had passed away 10 years ago. William Holloway never got to see his daughter become a billionaire. He never got to see her name on buildings and magazine covers. But Denise carried him with her every single day. She wore his old watch, a simple Timex that she kept running even though she could afford any luxury brand in the world. She remembered his words, spoken to her when she was just a teenager frustrated by the unfairness she saw around her. "They will never give you respect, baby girl. You have to take it." Denise had taken his advice literally. She took respect by being undeniable, by building something so impressive that even her harshest critics had to acknowledge her accomplishments. Looking around the lounge, Denise noticed she was the only black person there. This was not unusual. First-class lounges, corporate boardrooms, and exclusive clubs were still overwhelmingly white spaces. She had learned to navigate them with grace and dignity, never shrinking herself to make others comfortable, but also never giving anyone ammunition to use against her. Her appearance this morning was impeccable. She wore a charcoal gray Armani suit, perfectly tailored to her frame. Her natural hair was cut short and neat. A Patek Philippe watch adorned her wrist, understated but unmistakably expensive to anyone who knew what they were looking at. She carried a leather briefcase that contained her laptop, documents for the partnership announcement, and her passport. Everything about her screamed success and professionalism. Across the lounge, an older white man sat watching her. Gerald Whitmore was 60 years old, with thinning gray hair and the kind of permanent scowl that suggested he found most things in life disappointing. Gerald had built his career in manufacturing, though his company, Whitmore Industries, had fallen on hard times in recent years. He had lost a major contract to a competitor and was quietly bitter about it. He did not know it yet, but that competitor was Holloway Aerospace. Gerald looked at Denise and felt something shift in his stomach. He could not explain it logically, but her presence bothered him. A black woman, sitting in first class, working on an expensive laptop, wearing designer clothes. It did not fit his understanding of how the world should work. He told himself he was not racist. He just believed in certain standards, certain expectations about who belonged in certain places. Behind the reception counter stood Brittany, a 25-year-old lounge attendant with blonde hair and an artificially bright smile. Brittany had grown up in a small town in Georgia where everyone looked like her and diversity was something she only saw on television. She had been working at the airport for 2 years, and she prided herself on maintaining the exclusivity of the first-class lounge. When she saw Denise walk in earlier, something about it seemed wrong to her. She could not articulate exactly what. The woman had shown her boarding pass and walked in confidently. But Brittany felt an itch, a suspicion that perhaps this passenger did not truly belong here. Near the window, a young couple sat taking selfies and filming everything around them. Trevor and Madison were newlyweds from Ohio, celebrating their honeymoon with a first-class upgrade. They documented everything for their social media followers, always looking for content that might go viral. They had noticed Denise when she walked in, and Madison had even whispered to her husband that she looked like someone important. Neither of them knew how significant that observation would become within the hour. Denise continued working on her laptop, unaware that the next 60 minutes would test everything she believed about herself, about justice, and about how far America had really come. She was thinking about her father, about the partnership announcement, about the future of her company. She had no idea that somewhere in this very lounge, forces were already moving to challenge her right to simply exist in this space. The soft jazz continued playing. The coffee machines hummed. And Denise Holloway, CEO of a $2 billion company, sat in her rightful seat, completely unaware that she was about to become the target of something ugly and all too familiar. The first sign of trouble came exactly 15 minutes after Denise had settled into her seat. Brittany approached her with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes, the kind of smile that service workers use when they are about to ask an uncomfortable question. "Excuse me, ma'am," Brittany said, her voice carrying a syrupy sweetness that felt performative. "I just need to verify your boarding pass. This lounge is exclusively for first-class passengers." Denise looked up from her laptop, her expression neutral but her mind already cataloging this interaction. She had been in this lounge for 15 minutes. Several other passengers had entered after her, all of them white, and none of them had been asked to show their boarding passes twice. Still, Denise reached into her briefcase and produced her ticket. "Here you go," she said calmly. "First class, seat 2A, flight VX247 to New York." Brittany took the boarding pass and examined it with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to the task. She held it up to the light as if checking for counterfeit markings. She compared the name on the pass to something on her tablet. Her brow furrowed in a performance of concern. "The system is running slowly today," Brittany said. "I just need to make sure everything matches up. We have had some issues lately." Denise understood immediately what was happening. This was not about system verification. This was about her presence making someone uncomfortable. She had experienced variations of this throughout her entire life, the extra scrutiny that came with being black in spaces where whiteness was the default. But she had also learned that the best response was often patience. Let them exhaust their suspicions. Let them find nothing wrong. Let reality embarrass them. "Take your time," Denise said, returning her attention to her laptop. Brittany seemed almost disappointed by this lack of reaction. She had perhaps expected defensiveness, something she could interpret as suspicious behavior. Instead, Denise gave her nothing. Brittany returned to her station, but she kept glancing back at the black woman in the corner, her suspicion undiminished. 15 minutes later, Brittany returned. This time her smile was thinner, her voice slightly harder. "Ma'am, I apologize, but I need to see some identification. Just to match with the boarding pass. Standard procedure." Denise knew this was not standard procedure. No one else in the lounge had been asked for identification. But again, she chose not to escalate. She pulled out her passport, a well-traveled document with stamps from dozens of countries, and handed it to Brittany. The attendant opened it and stared at the photo for an uncomfortably long time. "The photo looks different," Brittany said, her tone suggesting she had found something incriminating. Denise kept her voice level. "That photo was taken 5 years ago. People change slightly over time." Brittany nodded slowly, as if Denise had just confirmed something suspicious rather than stating an obvious fact. She handed back the passport but did not apologize for the inconvenience. As she walked away, Denise noticed Gerald Whitmore watching the interaction with undisguised interest. Their eyes met briefly. Gerald looked away first, but not before Denise saw the satisfaction on his face. He was enjoying this. The third approach came 20 minutes later, and this time Brittany dropped all pretense of routine verification. "Ma'am, I need to ask about your occupation. First-class tickets are quite expensive, and we like to know our clientele." Denise set down her coffee cup and looked directly at Brittany. "I own a company," she said simply. The words hung in the air between them. Brittany waited for elaboration that did not come. "What kind of company?" she pressed. Denise recognized this for what it was. Brittany was not asking because she was curious. She was asking because she did not believe a black woman could afford a first-class ticket without some explanation. The question itself was the insult. "I do not believe that is relevant to my use of this lounge," Denise replied, her voice still calm but now carrying an edge of steel. "I have shown you my boarding pass. I have shown you my passport. There is nothing else I am required to provide." Brittany's face flushed slightly. She was not used to being challenged, especially not by someone she had already mentally categorized as beneath her. "I am just trying to ensure passenger safety," she said, her voice taking on a defensive whine. "Certain passengers have complained about feeling uncomfortable." Denise looked around the lounge. The only person who seemed uncomfortable was Gerald Whitmore, who was now openly staring at her with an expression of distaste. "Which passengers?" Denise asked. "And what exactly are they uncomfortable about?" "My presence. The color of my skin." Brittany stepped back as if Denise had slapped her. "I never said anything about race," she protested. "I am just doing my job." Before Denise could respond, Brittany turned and walked quickly toward the staff room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. What happened next was precisely what Denise had feared. Gerald Whitmore rose from his seat and walked to the reception counter, making no effort to lower his voice. "I pay a lot of money for first-class service," he said loudly, clearly wanting Denise to hear. "And part of what I am paying for is a certain standard of clientele. That woman over there, I have been watching her. She does not look like she belongs here." Brittany nodded sympathetically. "I understand your concern, sir. I have already verified her credentials multiple times." Gerald leaned closer, lowering his voice only slightly. "Have you verified them properly? Because in my experience, people like her often find ways to game the system. Stolen credit cards. Fraud. You know how it is." Denise heard every word. She felt the familiar heat of anger rising in her chest, but she forced it down. This was not the first time someone had assumed she was a criminal simply because of her skin color, and it would not be the last. She had learned to channel that anger into fuel, to let it power her rather than consume her. But there was something particularly galling about this situation. She was literally on her way to announce a historic partnership that would bring hundreds of jobs to communities across America. She had created more wealth and opportunity than Gerald Whitmore would ever touch. And yet here he was, treating her like a suspect. Brittany disappeared into the staff room. Denise did not know it yet, but she was making a phone call that would escalate the situation dramatically. "Airport security, please," Brittany said into the phone. "I have a suspicious individual in the Velocity Airlines first-class lounge. Black female, approximately 40 to 50 years old. She is being evasive about her identity and occupation. Other passengers have expressed discomfort. I have verified her credentials multiple times, but something does not feel right." She paused, listening. "Yes, I think you should send someone to investigate. She might be using a stolen ticket or a fraudulent corporate account. Please hurry." Within 10 minutes, 2 security officers arrived at the lounge entrance. Raymond Caldwell was a 50-year-old white man who had worked airport security for 2 decades. He had a thick build, a receding hairline, and the kind of world weariness that came from years of dealing with difficult passengers. But Raymond also carried something else, a set of unconscious biases that he would never admit to possessing. He prided himself on his ability to spot trouble, and in his experience, trouble often wore a certain face. His partner, Derek Monroe, was a 28-year-old black man who had been on the job for only 6 months. Derek had taken this position because he needed steady work while he saved money for flight school. His dream was to become a pilot, and this job was just a stepping stone. But being black in airport security was complicated. He often found himself caught between his colleagues and passengers who looked like him. Raymond approached Denise with the confidence of someone who had already made up his mind. "Ma'am, we received a report about your ticket. Can you come with us to verify your credentials?" Denise looked up at him, then at Derek standing slightly behind, his expression uncomfortable. "A report about my ticket," she repeated. "I have shown my ticket and my identification to the lounge attendant 3 separate times. What additional verification do you require?" Raymond's jaw tightened. He was not used to passengers questioning him. "Ma'am, please do not make this difficult. Just come with us and we can sort this out quickly." Denise did not move. "I am not going anywhere. I have done nothing wrong. I am a first-class passenger waiting for my flight. If you have concerns about my ticket, you can verify it from right here. I am not leaving this seat." Raymond took a step closer, his posture becoming more aggressive. "Ma'am, you are creating a disturbance. If you refuse to cooperate, I will have to use other methods. Derek shifted uncomfortably behind him. Something about this situation felt wrong. He had seen Raymond interact with dozens of passengers over the past 6 months, and he had never seen him take this tone with a white passenger. But Derek was new. He was still on probation. If he spoke up against his senior partner, he could lose his job. Gerald Whitmore watched from across the lounge, a thin smile playing on his lips. This was exactly what he wanted. Brittany stood behind the counter, her arms crossed, looking vindicated. The young couple with the camera, Trevor and Madison, had started recording. They sensed that something significant was happening, something that might get them attention on social media. Denise Holloway sat in her first-class seat, surrounded by people who did not believe she belonged there, facing security officers who had already decided she was guilty of something. And the situation was about to get much, much worse. Raymond Caldwell was not accustomed to passengers who refused to comply with his requests. In his 2 decades of airport security experience, he had developed a simple philosophy: guilty people resisted, innocent people cooperated. By this logic, the black woman in front of him had already revealed herself as a problem. "Ma'am, this is your final warning," he said, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of authority. "You need to stand up and come with us right now, or I will be forced to physically remove you from this lounge." Denise Holloway met his gaze without flinching. She had faced more intimidating adversaries than Raymond Caldwell. She had negotiated deals with executives who tried to bully her out of contracts worth millions. She had stood her ground against investors who assumed she would fold under pressure. A security guard with a power complex was not going to break her. "I will say this one more time," Denise replied, her voice calm but firm. "I am a paying first-class passenger. I have provided my boarding pass and my passport. I have committed no crime and violated no policy. You have no legal authority to remove me from this lounge, and if you put your hands on me, you will regret it for the rest of your career." Something flickered in Raymond's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or surprise at her confidence. But his pride would not allow him to back down, not with an audience watching. Gerald Whitmore was observing eagerly from across the room. Other passengers had stopped what they were doing to watch. If Raymond backed down now, he would look weak. And Raymond Caldwell never looked weak. He reached out and grabbed Denise's arm. "You are coming with me," he said, pulling her upward. Denise did not resist physically, she knew better than to give him an excuse to claim she was violent, but she also did not help him. He had to pull her bodily from the seat, her laptop sliding off the armrest and clattering to the floor. Her designer handbag fell beside it, the contents spilling across the marble. "This is assault," Denise said loudly, making sure everyone in the lounge could hear. "You are assaulting a passenger for no reason other than my skin color." Raymond's face reddened. "Do not make this about race," he snarled. "This is about security." He and Derek began moving Denise toward the lounge exit. The young couple, Trevor and Madison, had their phones out and were recording everything. Madison's hands were shaking slightly, but she kept the camera steady. This was exactly the kind of content that went viral. Trevor was already thinking about the caption he would write when he posted it. Around them, other passengers reacted in different ways. Some looked uncomfortable, averting their eyes, not wanting to get involved. Others watched with expressions that ranged from concern to barely concealed satisfaction. Gerald Whitmore made no effort to hide his pleasure. This was exactly what he had wanted when he complained to Brittany. As they moved through the lounge toward the exit, Denise made one more attempt. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, not out of arrogance but out of a desperate hope that reality might penetrate their assumptions. Raymond laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Let me guess. You are some celebrity. An athlete's wife. Or maybe just another scammer with a good story." Derek, walking behind them, felt something twist in his stomach. He had taken this job because he needed the money, but this was not what he had signed up for. This woman was clearly not a threat. She was dressed better than anyone else in the lounge, including his boss. She carried herself with the kind of dignity that came from actual achievement, not from pretense. But Derek said nothing. His probation period was not over. He had a mother to support, a dream of flight school, and a future he could not risk. "I am the CEO of Holloway Aerospace Technologies," Denise said, her voice carrying clearly through the space. "My company just signed a $500 million deal with the airline you work for. I am on my way to New York to announce this partnership." Raymond actually laughed out loud at this. "Right," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "And I am the President of the United States. Nice try, but the sob story is not going to work." From across the lounge, Gerald Whitmore shouted, "She is lying. Arrest her for fraud." Several passengers murmured in agreement. The narrative had already been decided in their minds. A black woman claiming to be a CEO. Claiming to own an aerospace company. It was too improbable to be true. They escorted Denise out of the lounge and into the main terminal, where travelers hurried past on their way to various gates. Some people stopped to stare at the spectacle of a well-dressed black woman being led away by security. A few took out their phones to record. Most kept walking, not wanting to involve themselves in whatever was happening. Denise remained calm throughout, though inside she was cataloging every detail for the lawsuit that would inevitably follow. She noted the time, the names on the security badges, the witnesses around her, the cameras that might have captured what happened. They took her to a small security office near Gate B12, a windowless room with fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable plastic chairs. Raymond pushed her toward one of the chairs with more force than necessary. "Sit down," he ordered. "We are going to sort out exactly who you are and what you are doing with that ticket." Derek closed the door behind them, his expression troubled. He wanted to say something, to point out that this entire situation felt wrong, but the words stuck in his throat. Meanwhile, back in the lounge, something was happening that would change the course of events. Trevor and Madison had just posted their video to Twitter. They had captioned it, "Black Woman Dragged from First Class Lounge at Atlanta Airport," with a series of shocked face emojis. The video was raw and compelling, showing Denise's calm dignity in contrast to Raymond's aggressive handling. Within minutes, it began to spread. People shared it, commented on it, tweeted it with outrage. Someone with knowledge of the aerospace industry recognized Denise. "Wait, that is Denise Holloway," they wrote. "She is the CEO of Holloway Aerospace. She was literally on the cover of Forbes last month." The comment got liked thousands of times. Suddenly, the narrative was shifting. In the security office, Denise sat with her hands folded in her lap while Raymond demanded to see documentation proving she had purchased the ticket legitimately. "My assistant booked it through our corporate account," Denise explained patiently, as if speaking to a slow child. "Holloway Aerospace has an account with Velocity Airlines. You can verify this by calling the airline directly." Raymond pulled out his phone and made a show of calling to verify. But whether by accident or design, he called a general customer service number rather than the corporate accounts department. After waiting on hold for several minutes, he was told that customer service could not access corporate account information. "There is no record of your purchase," Raymond announced triumphantly. "You are under arrest for ticket fraud." Derek, who had been standing silently by the door, finally spoke. "Raymond, maybe we should check this more carefully. I looked her up on my phone. There are a lot of articles about her. She really does seem to be the CEO of an aerospace company." Raymond spun on him, his face twisted with anger. "What did you say to me, rookie? Are you questioning my judgment?" Derek's courage wavered. "No, I just think maybe we should be sure before we do something we cannot take back." Raymond stepped closer to Derek, lowering his voice to a threatening hiss. "You have been on this job for 6 months. I have been doing this for 20 years. I know a con artist when I see one. Now shut your mouth and let me handle this." Derek shut his mouth. He looked at Denise with something like apology in his eyes, but he did not speak again. Denise saw the struggle on his face and understood it. She had seen it many times before, the internal conflict of black people in positions where speaking up for justice meant risking their own security. She did not blame Derek. The system was designed to make people like him choose between solidarity and survival. But she also filed away his moment of doubt. It meant he still had a conscience, and that might matter later. Denise had one card left to play. "I want to call my lawyer," she said. Raymond shrugged. "Go ahead. Call whoever you want. They can meet you at the police station after I have you arrested." Denise pulled out her phone and dialed Harrison Cole, the senior partner at Morrison & Cole, one of the most powerful law firms in Atlanta. Harrison answered on the second ring. "Denise? I thought you were on your way to New York." In a few short sentences, Denise explained the situation. Harrison's response was immediate and explosive. "Do not move. Do not say another word. I am calling the airline right now. I am calling the airport director." And Denise? These people have no idea what they have just done. While Denise Holloway sat in that cramped security office with Raymond Caldwell looming over her, a series of phone calls were ricocheting through the aviation industry at the speed of panic. Harrison Cole, Denise's lawyer, was on the phone with the Velocity Airlines legal department, threatening the kind of lawsuit that ends careers and bankrupts companies. The airline's chief counsel was simultaneously trying to reach Theodore Ashford, the chairman, who was already in New York preparing for the partnership announcement. And on flight VX-247, still sitting at the gate, Captain Franklin Bennett was about to learn something that would change the course of his day and, in some ways, his life. Franklin Bennett was 55 years old, a man whose face showed the lines of experience and whose silver hair spoke of the wisdom that comes from decades of navigating both aircraft and human nature. He had been flying for 30 years, the last 20 with Velocity Airlines, building a reputation as one of the most skilled and principled captains in the company's history. Before commercial aviation, he had served as a pilot in the United States Air Force, flying missions over Iraq that he rarely talked about. The military had taught him discipline, precision, and the importance of following rules. But the military had also taught him something else, that some rules were worth breaking when following them meant participating in injustice. Franklin's life outside the cockpit was shaped by a single profound relationship. 25 years ago, he had married Margaret, a beautiful and brilliant black woman who worked as a civil rights attorney. Their love story had faced its share of challenges, raised eyebrows in certain circles, and harsh words from people who believed that races should not mix. But Franklin and Margaret had built a life together, raising two daughters, Simone, who was now a doctor, and Rachel, who was in her final year of law school. These women, his wife and his daughters, had opened Franklin's eyes to realities that he might otherwise have been able to ignore. He had seen how the world treated them differently because of their skin color. He had watched store clerks follow them through aisles, had seen taxi drivers pass them by, had listened to Margaret's stories of being mistaken for the help at her own law firm events. Franklin's own whiteness had protected him from these experiences, but loving black women had made him unable to unsee the injustice they faced daily. On this particular morning, Franklin was in the cockpit running through pre-flight checks with his co-pilot, Nathan Price. Nathan was 35, capable and easygoing, the kind of co-pilot who made long flights pleasant. The passengers were boarding, and everything seemed routine until Nathan's phone buzzed with a notification. "Captain, something strange is happening in the terminal," Nathan said, scrolling through his phone. "There is some kind of video going viral. A black woman being dragged out of the first-class lounge." Franklin looked over, curious but not yet alarmed. "Dragged out? What for?" Nathan kept reading. "People are saying she was racially profiled. Security claimed her ticket was suspicious. But get this, some people online are claiming she is actually the CEO of some aerospace company." Before Franklin could respond, his own phone rang. The caller ID showed Theodore Ashford, the chairman of Velocity Airlines. This was unusual. Franklin had met Theodore at company events, but they did not typically communicate directly. "Theodore," Franklin answered. "What can I do for you?" The chairman's voice was tense, urgent. Franklin, we have a situation. The CEO of Holloway Aerospace, Denise Holloway, is on your flight today. Or at least, she is supposed to be. We just signed a $500 million deal with her company. But I am getting reports that she has been detained by airport security at the first-class lounge. Something about her ticket being suspicious. Franklin felt a chill run down his spine. Detained? For what? Theodore's frustration was palpable even through the phone. Nothing legitimate, as far as I can tell. It sounds like racial profiling, pure and simple. I need you to find out what is happening. This woman is incredibly important to our company. If she is being mistreated by people wearing Velocity uniforms, we need to fix it immediately. Franklin was already unbuckling his seatbelt. I am on it, Theodore. I will call you back. He stood up, his tall frame filling the cockpit doorway. Nathan, take over the pre-flight. I need to investigate something. Franklin moved through the plane and into the jet bridge, where Sandra Wells, the lead flight attendant, was managing the boarding process. Sandra was 42, experienced and sharp-eyed, the kind of person who noticed everything. Captain, is everything all right? She asked, seeing the unusual sight of a pilot leaving the aircraft before departure. Sandra, I need information. A black woman was supposed to be in seat 2A today. First class. Have you seen her board? Sandra checked her tablet. Seat 2A is still empty. The name on the reservation is Holloway. I assumed she was just running late. Franklin shook his head. She is not running late. She has been detained by security. Where would they have taken her? Sandra's expression shifted from confusion to concern. There is a security office near gate B12. Captain, what is going on? Franklin was already moving down the jet bridge. Something that should not be happening. But now I have to pause this story right here because I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of how they looked? Have you ever been in a situation where you wanted to speak up but felt like you could not? I want you to do something for me right now. If you believe that Captain Franklin did the right thing by leaving his cockpit to investigate, comment the number 1 below. If you think he should have stayed in his plane and let someone else handle it, comment the number 2. And while you are in the comments, do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Your engagement helps stories like this reach more people who need to hear them. Now here is my question. What do you think is going to happen when Franklin reaches that security office? Will he be able to convince Raymond to release Denise? Or will the situation escalate into something even more dramatic? The answer might surprise you. Let us continue. Franklin moved through the terminal with purpose, his captain's uniform parting crowds like a wave. People stepped aside instinctively when they saw the 4 stripes on his shoulder, recognizing the authority he carried. He reached the security office near gate B12 and could hear voices inside, one raised and aggressive, another calm but strained. He did not knock. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The scene before him confirmed his worst fears. A black woman in an expensive suit sat in a plastic chair, her posture dignified despite the circumstances. A white security guard loomed over her, his body language aggressive and hostile. A young black security guard stood near the door, his expression conflicted. Papers and a passport lay scattered on a desk. I am Captain Franklin Bennett of Flight VX-247, Franklin announced, his voice commanding immediate attention. What is going on here? Raymond Caldwell turned, momentarily thrown by the unexpected intrusion. Captain, this is a security matter. You should return to your aircraft. Franklin did not move. This woman is booked on my aircraft. That makes her my concern. What are the charges? Raymond puffed up with self-importance. She is suspected of ticket fraud. Corporate account with no verifiable record. She has been evasive about her identity and uncooperative with security protocols. Franklin looked at Denise. Despite everything, she maintained her composure, meeting his eyes with something like hope. Then Franklin looked at his phone, at the photo Theodore had texted him along with Denise's name and the message, "Treat her like royalty." The woman in the photo was undeniably the woman in front of him. Ms. Holloway, Franklin said, addressing her directly. "I apologize for whatever has happened to you this morning. I just received a call from Theodore Ashford, the chairman of Velocity Airlines. He informed me about your partnership with our company." Denise nodded slowly. "Then you understand that this is all a terrible misunderstanding." Franklin turned back to Raymond, his expression hardening. "Release her. Now." Raymond's face twisted with a combination of confusion and defiance. "Captain, with all due respect, you have no authority over airport security matters. I do not care who she claims to be. Until I verify her identity through proper channels, she is not going anywhere." Franklin took a step closer, using his height and the weight of his uniform to full effect. "Then let me make this perfectly clear. That aircraft sitting at gate B7 is not moving until this woman is released and treated with the respect she deserves. 300 passengers can wait. Justice cannot." The security office fell silent after Franklin's declaration. Raymond Caldwell stared at the captain as if he had just spoken in a foreign language. Derek Monroe, still standing by the door, felt something shift in the room, a balance of power tipping in a new direction. Denise Holloway remained seated, but for the first time since this ordeal began, she allowed herself to feel something like hope. "You cannot be serious," Raymond finally said, his voice losing some of its earlier bluster. "You would delay an entire flight for her?" Franklin did not blink. "I would cancel an entire flight if necessary. What I will not do is fly 300 passengers to New York while a woman is being unlawfully detained because of the color of her skin." Raymond tried a different approach, his tone becoming almost wheedling. "Look, Captain, I understand you want to be a hero here. But I have been doing this job for 20 years. I know when something is not right." This woman could not properly explain how she got a first-class ticket on a corporate account. "That is suspicious." Franklin walked to the desk and picked up Denise's passport. He examined it briefly, then looked at her. "Ms. Holloway, can you tell me about your company?" Denise straightened in her chair. "Holloway Aerospace Technologies. We design and manufacture components for commercial and military aircraft. We have contracts with Boeing, Airbus, and the Department of Defense. As of last week, we also have a partnership with Velocity Airlines worth $500 million over 5 years." Franklin nodded, then turned to Raymond. "That company is real. I have read about it in aviation trade publications. The CEO is a black woman named Denise Holloway who grew up in Alabama and built the company from nothing. That is her." Raymond's face reddened. Anyone could claim to be a CEO. Where is the proof? Where is the company ID, the business card, the verification? Franklin pulled out his phone and showed Raymond the text from Theodore Ashford. "This is a message from the chairman of our airline. It includes her name, her photo, and instructions to ensure she is treated with the highest level of service. Is that verification enough for you?" For a long moment, Raymond said nothing. His face went through a series of expressions, confusion, doubt, and finally something that looked almost like fear as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. But pride is a powerful thing, and Raymond's pride would not let him admit defeat easily. "Even if she is who she says she is," he said, grasping for straws, "she was still uncooperative. She refused to answer questions. She was hostile to my attempts to verify her identity." Denise spoke for the first time in several minutes. "I answered every question I was required to answer. I showed my boarding pass. I showed my passport. The only thing I refused to do was explain why a black woman could afford a first-class ticket. Because that question should never have been asked in the first place." Derek, who had been wrestling with his conscience throughout this entire ordeal, finally found his voice. "She is telling the truth, Raymond." Both men turned to look at him. "I searched her name on my phone when we first brought her here. There are hundreds of articles about her." Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, Business Insider. She is exactly who she says she is. I tried to tell you, but you would not listen. Raymond turned on his junior partner with fury in his eyes. You are taking her side. You traitor. After everything I have done to train you, you stab me in the back like this? Derek stood his ground, though his voice shook slightly. I am not stabbing you in the back. I am telling the truth. That is what we are supposed to do. The door to the security office opened, and a woman in a business suit strode in. Victoria Lane, the director of airport operations, had been alerted to the situation by the rapidly spreading social media firestorm and the urgent calls from Velocity Airlines' legal department. She was 48 years old, sharp and efficient, with no patience for problems that should have been avoided. What in the name of common sense is going on here? She demanded. I have got videos all over social media, our stock price is dropping, and Theodore Ashford himself is on the phone demanding answers. Raymond tried to explain, but his version of events sounded increasingly weak as he spoke. Victoria listened for about 30 seconds before cutting him off. Let me understand this. You detained the CEO of Holloway Aerospace, a woman who just signed a $500 million deal with our airline, because you thought a black woman could not possibly be a legitimate first-class passenger. Her voice dripped with contempt. Do you have any idea what you have done? Victoria turned to Denise, her expression shifting to something more conciliatory. Ms. Holloway, on behalf of this airport, I am profoundly sorry. This never should have happened. Please tell me what we can do to make this right. Denise stood slowly, taking her time, letting the moment stretch. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority. What you can do is suspend everyone involved in this incident pending a full investigation. What you can do is implement mandatory anti-racism training for all airport staff. What you can do is recognize that this kind of treatment happens to black travelers every single day, and that it took a CEO with a $500 million deal to get anyone to pay attention. Franklin watched this exchange with a sense of vindication. He had taken a risk by leaving his cockpit and threatening to delay the flight, but it had been the right call. Sometimes, following rules meant participating in injustice. He had learned that lesson decades ago, and he had never forgotten it. Victoria nodded rapidly at each of Denise's demands. Yes. Absolutely. All of that will happen. I promise you. She turned to Raymond with cold fury. You are suspended, effective immediately. Turn in your badge. Raymond's face went pale. Suspended? For doing my job. Victoria stepped closer to him. Your job is to ensure passenger safety, not to harass innocent travelers because of their skin color. Get out of my sight. As Raymond removed his badge with shaking hands, Derek watched with mixed emotions. He had worked with Raymond for 6 months, had learned from him, had even respected him in some ways. But he had also witnessed what that man was capable of when his biases went unchecked. Derek made a silent promise to himself. He would never be that kind of security officer. He would never let fear of speaking up outweigh the importance of doing what was right. As Denise Holloway walked out of that security office, flanked by Captain Franklin Bennett and the apologetic Victoria Lane, her mind traveled back through time to a small house in Birmingham, Alabama. She was 12 years old again, sitting on the front porch on a warm summer evening, watching her father come home from work. But this evening was different. William Holloway's usual steady gait was slower, heavier, as if he were carrying something invisible but impossibly weighty on his shoulders. He walked past Denise without his customary greeting, went inside, and she heard her parents' muffled voices through the screen door. Later that night, she found him sitting on the back steps, staring at nothing. "Daddy, what is wrong?" she asked, settling beside him. William was quiet for a long moment before he spoke. "They passed me over again, baby girl. The promotion I have been working toward for 5 years. They gave it to a man who has been there half as long as me. A man whose work I have had to fix more times than I can count." Denise felt the unfairness of it burn in her chest. "But that is not right. You are the best mechanic at that base. Everyone says so. William smiled, but it was a sad smile, one that held a lifetime of similar disappointments. Being the best does not always matter when you look like us. Sometimes, no matter how hard you work, they will never see your worth. They will only see the color of your skin. Denise was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then she said something that surprised both of them. Then I will make them see. I will become so successful that they will not be able to look away. William put his arm around her, pulling her close. That is my girl. But promise me something. When you get there, when you have all that success, do not forget where you came from. And do not let them change who you are. That conversation had shaped the rest of Denise's life. She had worked with ferocious determination, driven by a need to prove that her father's sacrifice and pain had not been in vain. When William died of a heart attack at 63, just a few years before Holloway Aerospace really took off, Denise had been devastated. He never got to see the magazine covers, the billion-dollar valuations, the contracts with companies that had once dismissed people who looked like them. But she carried him with her in everything she did. The company bore his name. His old Timex watch was on her wrist right now, even as she walked through Atlanta's airport surrounded by people apologizing for treating her like a criminal. In another time and place, Franklin Bennett was also shaped by the women he loved. His relationship with Margaret had begun 25 years ago at a dinner party in Boston. He was a young Air Force pilot, handsome and confident, used to women noticing him. Margaret was a law student at Harvard, brilliant and beautiful, not particularly interested in being noticed. Their first conversation lasted 3 hours. By the end of the night, Franklin knew he was going to marry her. Their life together had opened his eyes to realities he had never had to face. The first time someone made a racist comment about their relationship, Franklin had wanted to fight. Margaret had stopped him. Anger does not change minds, Franklin. Actions do. She had spent her career as a civil rights attorney, fighting injustice through the legal system, teaching him that there were many ways to stand up for what was right. When their daughters were born, Franklin's education deepened. He watched the world treat his girls differently because of their brown skin. He saw how teachers underestimated them, how store clerks followed them, how police officers watched them with suspicion. His daughters were brilliant and accomplished, Simone becoming a doctor, Rachel heading to law school, but they faced obstacles Franklin had never encountered. What if this was Simone or Rachel being dragged out of a lounge? Franklin had asked himself when he heard about Denise. The answer was immediate and clear. He would burn the world down to protect them. And if he would do that for his daughters, how could he do less for any woman facing the same injustice? Derek Monroe carried his own history into that security office. His father, Samuel Monroe, had been a police officer in Atlanta for 30 years, one of the few black men on the force when he started. Samuel had faced constant harassment from colleagues, been passed over for promotions, been assigned the most dangerous beats in the city. He had endured it all in silence, believing that keeping his head down was the only way to survive and provide for his family. But the silence had cost him. Samuel developed ulcers, then high blood pressure, then the cancer that finally took him when Derek was 23. In his last months, Samuel had shared something with his son that Derek never forgot. I spent my whole life staying quiet when I should have spoken up. I told myself I was being smart, being strategic, but really, I was just being scared. Do not be like me, son. When you see something wrong, say something. Even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. Derek had carried that advice like a weight ever since. And yet, when the moment came, when he watched Raymond humiliate and detain an innocent woman, he had stayed silent. Fear of losing his job, fear of conflict, fear of what his coworker might think, all of it had paralyzed him. It was only when Captain Bennett arrived, when the power dynamic shifted, that Derek found the courage to speak. He was not proud of that. But he was determined to do better. When Denise Holloway was led past him on her way out of that office, Derek caught her eye. I am sorry, he said quietly. I should have done more. Denise paused, looking at him with an expression that was hard to read. You tried, she said. That is more than most. Do better next time. It was not absolution, exactly, but it was something. Derek nodded, accepting the charge. He would do better. He had to. Denise Holloway was being escorted back to the first-class lounge when the confrontation she thought was over suddenly reignited. Gerald Whitmore had been watching the situation unfold from a distance, growing increasingly agitated as he saw the narrative shifting against him. The woman he had tried to have removed was now being treated like visiting royalty. The security guard he had manipulated was being led away in disgrace. And worst of all, people were starting to look at him with the same suspicion that had been directed at her just an hour ago. Gerald could not let this stand. He had spent his entire life believing that people like him, white, successful, well-connected, were the rightful arbiters of who belonged in exclusive spaces. The idea that he might be wrong, that his instincts about who deserved first-class treatment had failed him, was intolerable. So instead of quietly accepting defeat, Gerald pushed through the small crowd that had gathered and planted himself directly in Denise's path. This is ridiculous, he announced loudly, wanting everyone to hear. I saw what happened. This woman was aggressive, hostile, threatening. She should be arrested, not apologized to. Victoria Lane stepped forward, her expression dangerous. Sir, I am going to need you to step aside and lower your voice. Gerald ignored her, his attention focused entirely on Denise. You people are all the same. Always playing the victim, always crying racism when someone dares to question you. I know what I saw. You do not belong here. Franklin Bennett had seen enough. He moved to stand beside Denise, his tall frame providing a subtle but unmistakable shield. Mr. Whitmore, he said, and the use of his name made Gerald flinch slightly, I would strongly suggest you walk away right now. Before this gets worse for you than it already is. Gerald sneered at him. Or what? You are going to hit me? Go ahead. Prove that you people are all the same. The lounge had gone dead silent. Every eye was on this confrontation. Phones were recording. The stakes could not have been higher. Franklin did not take the bait. Instead, he smiled, a calm, knowing smile that made Gerald even more uncomfortable. I do not need to hit you, Mr. Whitmore. I have something much more effective. The truth. He pulled out his phone and showed something on the screen. I thought your name sounded familiar when you shouted at Ms. Holloway earlier. Whitmore Industries. I remember now. You were in the trade publications a few years ago, but not for good reasons. Denise's eyes widened as she made the connection. Whitmore Industries. You were our competitor for the Boeing contract 3 years ago. You lost because of falsified safety reports. Your company was banned from Boeing facilities. Gerald's face went pale, then red, then pale again. Those charges were never proven, the investigation was dropped because of, that is none of your business. Victoria was already checking something on her tablet. Mr. Whitmore, I am seeing a notation on your passenger profile here. You are flagged as a problematic customer due to previous incidents of harassment toward staff. And it appears your corporate account with Velocity Airlines was terminated last year following complaints from multiple flight attendants. She looked up at him with barely concealed satisfaction. I think the question of who belongs in this lounge has just been answered rather definitively. Gerald looked around desperately, seeking allies, but found none. The other passengers who had watched silently earlier, some of whom had perhaps shared his prejudices privately, were now distancing themselves. No one wanted to be associated with him. The young couple who had filmed everything were now capturing his humiliation with the same enthusiasm they had shown for Denise's earlier treatment. The narrative had completely reversed. This is not fair, Gerald sputtered. This is not how this was supposed to go. She should be the one being questioned, not me. Denise stepped forward, and for the first time, she allowed her anger to show just slightly. That is the problem, Mr. Whitmore. People like you have decided that people like me should always be questioned, always be suspected, always be second-guessed. It never occurred to you that you might be wrong. It never occurred to you that your assumptions about who belongs where might be based on nothing but your own prejudice. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. Let me tell you something. I have faced men like you my entire career. Men who assumed I got where I am through luck or fraud or special treatment. Men who could not accept that a black woman from Birmingham might be smarter, more hardworking, and more successful than they could ever dream of being. Every single one of those men is now working for people like me, or they are out of work entirely. That is going to be your future too. Not because I will do anything to make it happen. But because the world is changing, and people who think like you are being left behind. Gerald had no response. For perhaps the first time in his life, he was utterly silenced. Victoria signaled to airport security, and two officers who were not Raymond approached. Mr. Whitmore, you are banned from Velocity Airlines lounges and flights effective immediately. Please gather your belongings. You will need to make alternative travel arrangements. As Gerald was led away, protesting weakly, Denise felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The confrontation was over, but the emotional toll of the past 2 hours was catching up with her. Captain Bennett noticed and gently touched her elbow. Ms. Holloway, may I escort you back to your seat? We have a flight to catch, and I believe you have a historic announcement to make in New York. Denise nodded, suddenly grateful for this man who had risked his career to stand up for her. Thank you, Captain. For everything you did today. Franklin shook his head. I did not do anything extraordinary, Ms. Holloway. I just refused to participate in something wrong. That should be ordinary. The fact that it is not is the problem we still need to solve. The walk back to the first-class lounge felt different this time. Word had spread through the terminal about what happened, and Denise Holloway found herself the subject of spontaneous applause from travelers who recognized her from the viral videos. Some called out encouragement. Others simply nodded with respect as she passed. It was a strange experience, being treated as a symbol when all she had wanted was to quietly catch her flight. When they reached the lounge, Brittany was notably absent. Her station behind the counter was now occupied by a different attendant, an older black woman named Patricia who looked at Denise with a mixture of professional courtesy and personal understanding. Ms. Holloway, please accept my apologies on behalf of this lounge. Can I get you anything while you wait for your flight? Denise asked for a glass of water and found a seat near the window. Captain Bennett excused himself to check on the flight status, promising to personally welcome her aboard when it was time to go. Left alone for a moment, Denise pulled out her phone and saw that it had been exploding with notifications. Missed calls from her assistant, from board members, from media outlets requesting interviews. Text messages from friends who had seen the videos. Emails from partners and clients expressing support. The world had been watching her humiliation, but it had also watched her dignity, and something about that combination had captured people's attention. Her phone rang. It was Theodore Ashford, video calling from New York. Denise answered, and the chairman's face filled her screen, his expression a mixture of relief and fury. Denise, thank God. I have been trying to reach you. Are you all right? She gave him a brief summary of what had happened since they last spoke, leaving out most of the emotional details. Theodore listened, his jaw tightening with each new revelation. This is completely unacceptable, he said when she finished. I have already spoken with my executive team. The people responsible will face consequences. But I need to know, Denise, does this change anything about our partnership? Denise had been thinking about this question. She could walk away, take her company's business elsewhere, make a public statement that would humiliate Velocity Airlines even further. The petty part of her, the part that was still 12 years old and watching her father cry after another passed over promotion, wanted to do exactly that. But the strategic part of her, the part that had built a $2 billion company, knew that walking away would ultimately hurt her more than it would hurt them. And besides, there was an opportunity here. The partnership will proceed, she said, watching relief wash over Theodore's face. But with additional terms. Theodore nodded quickly. Name them. Whatever you need. Denise had prepared her list. First, a public apology from the airline, not just to me, but acknowledging that this kind of treatment happens to black travelers every day. Second, mandatory anti-racism training for all Velocity staff, developed in consultation with civil rights organizations. Third, a $1 million donation to scholarship funds for black students pursuing careers in aviation. Theodore did not hesitate. Done. All three. I will have the legal team draw up the amendments today. Denise was not finished. There is one more thing. The young security officer, Derek Monroe. He was the only person in that room who tried to do the right thing. He questioned his partner, he searched for the truth, and eventually he spoke up. I want him recognized for that. A promotion, a commendation, something that signals that doing the right thing has rewards. Theodore looked slightly surprised by this request but agreed readily. Consider it done. I will speak with the airport director personally. After the call ended, Denise sat quietly for a moment, processing everything. She thought about all the people who had been profiled and harassed in airports across the country, people who did not have her resources, her connections, her platform. Most of them suffered in silence, their humiliations invisible to the world. Today's viral videos might bring some temporary attention to the issue, but Denise knew that real change required sustained pressure, policy changes, and accountability. The scholarship fund was a start. The training programs were important. But the work would need to continue long after the headlines faded. The announcement came over the speaker. Flight VX-247 to New York was now boarding first-class passengers. Denise gathered her belongings, noting with some satisfaction that her laptop and handbag had been retrieved from where they had fallen during the earlier confrontation, cleaned, and returned to her in perfect condition. Small gestures of apology, but gestures nonetheless. As she walked toward the gate, she passed by the security office where she had been detained. Through the window, she could see Raymond Caldwell sitting alone at a desk, his badge gone, his face hollow. He was on the phone with someone, and from his expression, it was not a pleasant conversation. Denise felt a moment of something that was not quite sympathy but not quite satisfaction either. Raymond had made choices based on prejudice and pride, and now he was facing consequences. That was how the world should work. But she also knew that firing Raymond would not change the underlying problem. There were thousands of Raymonds at airports across America, in stores and schools and hospitals and police departments. The work was so much bigger than one man. Derek Monroe was standing near the gate, apparently having been reassigned to duties that did not involve Raymond. When he saw Denise approaching, he straightened almost to attention. Ms. Holloway. I heard you spoke to the chairman about me. I do not know what to say. Denise paused, looking at this young man who was trying so hard to do right in a world that often rewarded doing wrong. You said you want to be a pilot someday. Is that true? Derek nodded, surprised that she knew this. Yes, ma'am. I have been saving for flight school. This job was supposed to help me get there. Denise reached into her briefcase and pulled out a business card. Holloway Aerospace has a program for aspiring pilots. Full scholarships, including living expenses. I want you to apply. Derek stared at the card as if it might disappear. Ms. Holloway, I do not know if I deserve this. I did not speak up soon enough. I let them treat you that way for too long. You are right, Denise said, and Derek flinched. You should have spoken up sooner. You should have trusted your instincts when they told you something was wrong. But here is what I have learned in my career. The measure of a person is not whether they make mistakes. It is what they do after. You have a chance to build a different kind of future. Do not waste it. She left him holding the card and continued to the gate, where Captain Franklin Bennett was waiting to personally escort her onto the aircraft. As she stepped into the jet bridge, Denise felt the weight of the morning beginning to lift. She still had a historic announcement to make. She still had a company to run, employees depending on her, a legacy to build. One terrible morning was not going to stop her. If anything, it was going to fuel her. The press conference in New York was everything Theodore Ashford had promised and more. Hundreds of journalists filled the ballroom of a Manhattan hotel, cameras flashing, microphones extended, the air electric with anticipation. The viral videos from Atlanta had ensured that this announcement would receive far more attention than a typical corporate partnership. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had been dragged out of an airport lounge and who had responded not with rage but with dignity, not with retreat but with advance. Denise Holloway stood at the podium, Theodore Ashford beside her, the logos of Holloway Aerospace and Velocity Airlines displayed on screens behind them. She looked out at the sea of faces and felt a moment of profound gratitude for every struggle that had brought her here. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Make them see your worth." "Thank you all for being here today," Denise began. "I had planned to talk only about our historic partnership, about the $500 million agreement between Holloway Aerospace and Velocity Airlines, about the jobs and innovations this collaboration will create. But something happened this morning that I feel compelled to address first." She described the incident calmly, professionally, without dramatization. She talked about being questioned 3 times, about the assumptions that had been made about her right to occupy a first-class seat, about being physically removed from the lounge by security officers who had already decided she was guilty of something. "But this story is not about me," she continued. "I am a CEO with resources, with connections, with the ability to make phone calls that get answered immediately. What happened to me happens to Black Americans every single day, in airports and stores and restaurants and schools and hospitals. Most of them do not have a captain willing to delay his flight for them. Most of them do not have a chairman making urgent phone calls on their behalf. They suffer in silence, their humiliations invisible, their dignity denied." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I share this story not to seek sympathy, but to demand accountability. Not just from the individuals involved, but from all of us. Every time we see someone being treated unfairly and stay silent, we become complicit in that treatment. Every time we make assumptions about who belongs where based on the color of their skin, we perpetuate a system that has caused immeasurable harm. Change does not happen by accident. It happens because people like you and me decide that enough is enough." Theodore stepped up to the microphone, his expression solemn. "On behalf of Velocity Airlines, I offer our deepest apologies to Ms. Holloway and to everyone who has experienced similar treatment. But apologies without action are meaningless. That is why we are announcing today that all Velocity staff will undergo mandatory anti-bias training, that we are establishing a $1 million scholarship fund for Black students pursuing careers in aviation, and that we are conducting a comprehensive review of our policies and practices to ensure this never happens again." Then Theodore said something that made the room gasp with surprise. "There is one more announcement I would like to make. After witnessing Ms. Holloway's leadership, her grace under pressure, and her vision for a more just industry, the board of directors of Velocity Airlines has unanimously invited her to join our board as an independent director. She will be the first Black woman in the history of our company to hold this position." Denise was genuinely surprised. This had not been discussed, not negotiated, not even hinted at. She looked at Theodore, who smiled and stepped aside, gesturing for her to respond. For a moment, Denise was speechless, a rare occurrence for a woman who had built her career on the power of words. She thought about her father, sitting on those back porch steps, telling her they would never see her worth. She thought about all the doors that had been closed in her face, all the people who had underestimated her, all the nights she had worked until dawn because she knew she had to be twice as good. "I accept," she said simply. The room erupted in applause. 1 year later, Denise Holloway was flying from Atlanta to Los Angeles on a Velocity Airlines flight. She had attended countless board meetings by then, pushed through policy changes, mentored young executives from underrepresented backgrounds. Holloway Aerospace had expanded to Europe and Asia, now employing over 5,000 people worldwide. The scholarship fund she had demanded had sent more than 200 Black students to aviation schools. The anti-bias training had become a model that other airlines were beginning to adopt. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Derek Monroe speaking. I want to welcome you aboard and share a brief story, if you will indulge me. 1 year ago, I was working airport security when I witnessed something that changed my life. A woman was being treated unjustly, and I did not speak up as quickly as I should have. That woman gave me a second chance. She saw something in me that I was not sure I saw in myself. She sponsored my education, mentored me through flight school, and believed in me when I needed it most. Today, I am honored to have her on board. Ms. Denise Holloway, thank you for believing in me." Passengers who knew the story applauded. Those who did not looked around curiously before joining in. Denise smiled and looked out the window at the clouds stretching to the horizon. She thought about all the young black children who might see this story and believe that they too could become pilots or CEOs or whatever they dreamed of being. She thought about the ones who would still face discrimination and prejudice but who might find the strength to keep going anyway. The screen faded to black with words appearing in white text. Denise Holloway went on to expand Holloway Aerospace to 3 continents. Derek Monroe became one of the youngest captains at Velocity Airlines. Franklin Bennett retired with honors and established a foundation fighting discrimination in aviation. The scholarship fund has now sent over 300 students to flight schools across America. Sometimes, a single act of courage can change an entire industry. The final image appeared. They tried to remove her. Instead, she removed their prejudice. This is where I need to hear from you one more time before we end. What part of this story moved you the most? Was it Denise's refusal to be intimidated? Captain Bennett's decision to stand up for a stranger? Derek's journey from silent witness to airline captain? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And here is my challenge to you. Think about a time when you saw something unfair happening and did not speak up. What would you do differently if you could go back? Share your thoughts because your story might inspire someone else to find their voice. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about people who refuse to be defined by others' prejudices. Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you for being part of a community that values justice, courage, and human dignity. Until next time, remember that you have the power to change things just by refusing to stay silent. Take care of yourselves and each other. I will see you in the next video. This story teaches us that dignity cannot be purchased, but it must always be defended. Denise Holloway did not become a CEO to prove anything to the people who doubted her. She became successful because she refused to let their limitations define her possibilities. The first lesson is simple but powerful. Your worth is not determined by how others see you. It is determined by how you see yourself. When Raymond and Brittany looked at Denise, they saw a black woman who did not fit their expectations. When Denise looked at herself, she saw decades of hard work, sacrifice, and achievement that no one could take away. The second lesson is about courage. Captain Franklin Bennett risked his career to stand up for a stranger. He did not know Denise personally. He simply recognized injustice and refused to participate in it. We all have moments when we can choose to stay silent or speak up. Those moments define who we really are. The third lesson belongs to Derek Monroe. He teaches us that it is never too late to do the right thing. He failed at first. He stayed quiet when he should have spoken. But when the opportunity came again, he found his voice. Redemption is always possible for those who seek it. Finally, this story reminds us that change happens when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. Not because they expect rewards, but because they cannot live with themselves if they stay silent. Be the captain who refuses to take off. Be the voice that breaks the silence. Now I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever been judged unfairly because of how you look? Or have you witnessed someone being mistreated and wished you had spoken up? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters, and it might give someone else the courage to find their voice. If Denise's strength inspired you, hit that like button right now. If you believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their skin color, subscribe to this channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Together, we can spread stories that matter. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your support means everything to this channel. I hope this story reminded you of your own power to create change in the world around you. May you always have the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. Take care of yourself and the people you love. I will see you in the next story.